Hey everyone, Evan Kirstel with another great discussion around enterprise communication. Today I have Tom from Leap Expert, a company you're going to learn a lot about. Tom, how are you?
I'm well, Evan. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and I'm really excited for this. I've been chatting with your colleagues for some time. Maybe introduce yourself, Tom, your role at Leap Expert. You're out of New York City, and what you guys do at a high level.
Sure, absolutely. So again, Tom Venezia. It's great to be speaking to you today. I am responsible for business and sales in the Americas at Leap Expert. I've been involved in the financial services business for nearly 30 years now, with experience ranging from very small firms to large firms like Thomson Reuters and Refinitiv for many years. Focused mostly on communications, electronic trading, and the exchange of information between banks and brokers and their customers, which sort of led me to the Leap Expert world. I've been here for about 6 months now. Leap Expert is an organization that, as our tagline says, focuses on responsible business communication. So what that means is we are really focused on enabling banks and brokers to communicate with their counterparts in a responsible and compliant way. So as you've probably seen, there have been a number of SEC findings against some of the major banks in our industry right now, and so that sort of those fines and those findings by the SEC and the regulators sort of sit right in the wheelhouse of what Leap Expert is trying to accomplish. We're focused very much on enabling the banks and their employees to communicate externally with their counterparts over the channels that their customers prefer. It's a very different world today than it was in the past, where everything was over email and fax. And I think COVID was a contributing factor to that. But what we found now is everyone is communicating over text messaging platforms, WhatsApp or WeChat or iMessage, standard SMS, and that's very difficult for the banks to control. Everyone has their own device with all of those applications on their device, and so the employees are going to respond to their customers when they get a text. So what we try and do is help to centralize that communication, help to normalize it into a single pane of glass in some instances, in other instances to capture it on that native exchange, and we can get into that as we discuss, and provide an archive and an ongoing record for the banks, so that should the SEC come a calling, they have a record of all those communications that their employees were engaged in with their external counterparts.
Wow, this is fascinating. So, shadow IT, as we used to call it, has been a challenge for a long time, but the pandemic obviously brought this to the forefront. So you're not saying ban WhatsApp and ban iMessage and ban all these over-the-top services. You're saying enable them, but in a secure and compliant way. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly right, Evan. Yeah. So our goal is to broaden the channels of communication, not to restrict them, right? To enable banks to confidently say that you can communicate with your counterpart on whatever channel they choose, and we know as the compliance organization, that those messages are going to be captured, that they're going to be archived into our centralized archival system, and that we're going to be able to, should we need to, actually analyze those communications and make sure that there was no impropriety. And in fact, our service goes a step further and allows the banks to implement things like data leakage prevention controls, right? And so set up a slew of keywords or key phrases that they're asking their employees not to engage in, right? So one of the most prevalent in the industry is speculation, right? So saying, oh, you can't lose on this, right? Or this is a sure thing, right? So our system actually enables the banks to implement keywords and phrases that we will actually restrict from leaving
Oh,
their
wow.
environment. Yeah, so
That's
we have the
amazing.
ability, if you're leveraging the Leap Expert governed mode. So there are two modes of the delivery. There's the governed mode and the native mode. We can talk a bit about each, but On the governed side of the house, where we're actually sitting in the middle and enabling that communication from a single front end to multiple endpoints, we are able to say that does not comply with your compliance controls, and we're going to block that message, and then alert your compliance officer and say this message was in breach of your data leakage policy. We're going to prevent it. The flip side is true as well. So we protect the bank or broker's perimeter by providing tools like antivirus and anti-malware checks. So when you're exchanging information with your counterparty and they're using a text platform, there's always a desire to share images or to share files. And so what we can do is say, okay, this file that's coming into you from this client over WhatsApp, it has some suspicious content. It may or may not be malicious, but it's suspicious content. We're going to block that, protect your perimeter, and make sure that it doesn't enter your network, and so that you don't get hit with phishing or malware type content in your own network. So we're taking it very seriously. The fact that there are controls that need to be in place. These are financial institutions that have rigid compliance controls. And we're taking every step to ensure that they have all the tools they need to communicate more broadly, but in a compliant and protected way.
Amazing. So this goes well beyond the banking space. It seems so many regulated industries require this kind of compliance. I'm thinking healthcare and government agencies.
That's exactly right.
So what is your opportunity out there in the marketplace?
So it's interesting. I think you hit it on the head, right? There's so much more to the Leap Expert proposition than just the financial services industry. Right now, we're very focused on financial services industry because there is a imminent demand, right? There's a need right now for these banks to protect themselves from the slew of fines that we're seeing, right? $1 billion across 5 banks. 5 of the biggest name banks in the world have seen $1 billion, and it doesn't end there, right? There are going to be a bunch more. I'm certain of it, right? We're seeing sort of dribs and drabs of smaller fines coming out now, but the capability, the features and the functionality that Leap Expert provides are very applicable beyond just the FinServ markets, right? So in healthcare, 100%, we see a massive opportunity in healthcare. In government, there's so much protection around data distribution and communications. So we're actually starting to look at some opportunities in the government space as well. Small municipalities even we're having conversations with about how could you help us protect our employees from sending data out that we know is controlled. And even beyond that, education, we think there's a tremendous opportunity in education. So and legal, right? Legal, there's so much confidentiality, right, around the exchange of information. If you're working a big financial deal, or if it's just a case that you're working with a colleague in another office, you need that data to be protected. So there's tremendous amount of opportunity, we believe, with our proposition, and we're really starting to see a significant amount of interest from all markets.
That's exciting. Well, tell me about this fine, though, that you mentioned. This is a bombshell. I mean, we usually fines from the SEC are kind of a slap on the wrist. $1 billion is not a slap on the wrist. What do you think was behind that? Was it a shot across the bow, or are there more to come? What's happening there?
Yeah, so the $1 billion is actually additive, right? It's $200 million to the 5 largest banks, to 5 of the largest banks in the world. Household names that we're all aware of, and I think basically it was just that, right? It was a message to these banks saying that you have a responsibility to manage this information. There are controls in place that have been in place for many, many years around what needs to be captured and how communications with customers need to occur. And so the fines are mostly entitled, fines for use of unapproved devices, right? But in essence, it's about communications. It's about the content more than the tool,
So
right?
basically, you're saying a cell phone, a mobile phone, is an unapproved device.
That's right, exactly. So there are a number of ways that banks are starting to protect themselves, right? One is taking services like ours, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of interest, and we're having conversations with many banks. Another is you need to control the device, right? And so you need to put software on there to control the device, or what we're seeing a bit more prevalent than in the past. In the past, it was no one wanted to carry two phones, right? It used to be you go to work, you got your BlackBerry, right? If you remember those days, you got your BlackBerry, and then you had your own personal phone, and then that sort of went by the wayside, and everybody said, I only really need one device, and we can put some software on there to sort of ensure that no one's misusing that device. But then the advent of all these texting tools came about. And so having your own personal device with all these texting tools becomes very difficult to manage. So what we're seeing now, a lot of banks are actually moving to a company issued device again. So you'll have your own
Oh,
personal phone and
oh,
your own.
please no, please no.
So, but I think what you'll find is it'll be a mix, right? Adoption is always difficult. Getting people to adopt something new and different is always difficult, which is why we have two modes of delivery of our service, which is the govern mode, where you have to take a different front end, right? Either that be Microsoft Teams or Slack or our front end, and that acts as your channel. Or the other mode we have is native, where you're actually using those applications to communicate. You're using WhatsApp, you're using WeChat, you're using iMessage to communicate with your counterparty, and we're capturing all that. And so the reason why I think people will be a bit more willing to adopt the two phone idea is you don't want to mix your personal and your professional, right? And once you get to that point where we have to capture your native messaging apps, we're capturing all of your native messaging apps, right? So so if you're communicating on iMessage with a work colleague, that's captured for work purposes. If you're communicating on your iMessage with your wife or your mom, right, that's captured as well, right? So people are going to be more willing to say, you know what, I need that sort of separation of work and home life, and if two phones gets me that, then fantastic, right? So I do think that in some instances you'll see where the adoption is a bit more. You find a bit more willingness on the side of the employees to adopt that two phones, just to keep that separation of that
I
work life
see.
balance.
And without getting too deep in the technology, your platform seems pretty open. You mentioned integrating into Microsoft Teams and Slack, and is it all through APIs and open integrations?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So we pride ourselves in having a very open architecture. So we have integrations with all of the major archival services. We have integrations with the major CRM services. In terms of the ability to take our software and implement it even into your own homegrown tools, it's all there as part of our API suite, and the SDKs that come along with the product. So it's really a very flexible and intuitive platform, and the APIs continue to advance and continue to grow, and we continue to interface with more and more partners on the street.
That's fantastic. So you're in New York City, the hub of finance globally. What would you say? Are people, in your opinion, moving back to the office in mass, or is it still this hybrid or remote world? I mean, remote working gave rise to this whole challenge, and it doesn't look to end anytime soon. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't see it ending anytime soon. I do see a bit of much more of a hybrid, right? And in fact, much more of a preference towards a hybrid. People do want to get back to the office. There's something to be said for having that social interaction and being able to sit in a room and really hammer things out and figure out a way forward, and with projects and deals, right? But I also think that people have sort of found the comfort and the productivity that they can achieve just working from home. So I think it will be a hybrid approach for some time. We're seeing a lot of the banks going to 3-day cycles, so 3 days in, 2 days out. And so I think that's likely to be the trend for at least the next year or so. And I think I think people will find that it works. It's productive, right? I mean, a lot of times, presence does not always equal productivity, right?
Mhm.
And so if you have a 3-hour commute, that's 3 hours. It's 3 hours lost, right? So yeah, I do see that there will be a mix. My opinion, there will be a mix of home versus in office. But our service again is very much catering to either, right? Even when you're in the office, people are sending you messages on your mobile, right?
Right.
So you're able to use the Leap Work proposition, the Leap Expert proposition, whether you're in the office, whether you're at home, whether you're on vacation. It's extremely portable and it's extremely functionally rich, and something that we see, regardless of whether you're in a brick and mortar establishment or you're working from your basement, right?
Yeah, I
There's
read an interesting piece that the Bloomberg terminals that you see everywhere in financial services are mostly used these days for messaging. So
Yes.
basically, everyone has an open address on the terminal, and the data is kind of easily accessible anywhere. But the messenger is what people are using. But you can't exactly take a Bloomberg terminal home or pack it in your bag for a business trip. So yeah, messaging is just so still an integral part of this financial services. I'll be in New York City for a couple events this fall. Looking forward to getting back out in the world. There's a Microsoft event and a Google event. What about you? What are you looking forward to as we hit September?
Yeah, the same actually. I'll be participating in a number of events. There's a few in the city. There's a Reg Tech event that's happening in New York, face to face. Really looking forward to that. Sort of no problem with the Zoom conferences, but it's really good to sort of shake hands and meet face to face and have face to face conversations. And do some demos face to face, right? That's always great to get that interaction with the with the customer. So yeah, I'll be traveling a bit in September and October, and really looking forward to it, and actually heading out to the West Coast as well for an event. So jumping on a plane for a business trip for the first time in a while be really good. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, me too. And so I'll be following you guys, and the whole RegTech space is fascinating, and you guys are really leading the pack, in my opinion, in terms of innovation and in communication. So, congratulations on all the success, and good luck as we head into the fall.
Thank you very much, Evan. I really appreciate your time.